Hello, I'm Mark Tucker.
Hey, I'm Alan Furstenberg, and we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. It's another week, Alan.
It is another week. It's really funny. They keep happening one right after another.
I know, it's just like that, and then like another year comes, and it's like more weeks. We
Oh my
just
God!
don't run out of them.
Don't say that. We're coming up on our year-end episodes, and
Yeah.
that always freaks me out. Uh, it was interesting. You and I were talking about what we could talk about this evening,
Yep.
and you shared some of the stuff that you were doing, and I shared some of the stuff that I was doing. And on the surface, none of it seemed very connected at all. But I think when we look a little bit more, there's this interesting thread that I think runs through all of them. So let's get started. What have you been working on this week?
Oh, well, kind of a side project that I've been looking at more. I've been spending more time over on BlueSky, which is the network that has increased in popularity to 23 million users. And just trying to better understand. I saw some posts or some hints about like technologically how what's the architecture like and how is it different than social networks that we're used to being Twitter/X and Threads specifically, and I guess even a little bit Mastodon. So I just have done some research on better understanding how Blue Sky works and its architecture based on something called App Protocol. But in kind of in that process of understanding how that works and how data flows through the system, then I came across an article where they were talking about scraping posts from Blue Sky and posting that on Hugging Face for data modeling. So kind of
Oh,
the idea of what's appropriate to do with data, and what's kind of what they did and what's being done about it. So that's kind of a topic that I brought forward, and I thought maybe we could talk about just a little bit.
yeah. So I guess the first question is what what is the policy for accessing data?
So the general policy, or what's posted for users of Blue Sky, is that your data is public. Um,
Okay, that seems pretty blunt.
Part of that is kind of the approach, the different approach that they're taking. They're trying to create a distributed system, in some ways, patterning microblogging after the internet itself. How there's different servers, and the idea is that users own their data and could potentially move that data with them to different social networks, or it's so they're trying to in some sense decentralize, not necessarily, it's not like blockchain type of stuff, and it's not peer to peer, but just following some of the web concepts to decentralize the data and associate it with a user. And for part of that communication mechanism, the way that they approach that is that the data is flowing through the system public. Now, there's ways to
Okay.
check that posts came from a user and signed, and there's different security mechanisms in place, but generally, you could connect to a WebSocket and listen to events flowing through the system, and which is exactly what these people did to gather data and just pull it off the system and store it, in a database or in files, and then post it up on Hugging Face. So, but
Okay.
but there are guidelines both on Blue Sky's side that says that, kind of try to give boundaries of like what's valid use of data needs to be kind of in the context of the system itself, as opposed to just free data for anybody to use.
So the point of the data being able to freely flow is so that you can use your data where
Yes,
you want to use it, not so that somebody else can use your data where and how they want to use it. Is kind of the
correct.
the argument.
Yes, there's a event stream of different providers. Give them different names. There's actually, like cloud systems that are specifically event streaming pipelines, but the name that they call it in BlueSky development is the fire hose, and you can connect a WebSocket to a fire hose and gather events that come off of it. And just because something's possible doesn't mean necessarily that it's right or ethical to do.
No, and that's, I think that's important to understand, and I feel like we're going to talk about this a little bit more. But it's also, just because it's technically possible, again, as you put it, you could still be running into copyright laws
Yep.
and infringement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly in the U.S., the moment we fix our statements in a fixed form, it's copyrighted, and we own that copyright. Now, we're giving BlueSky a license to distribute it,
Yep.
but we still own that copyright. We still technically can control how that's supposed to be used. I can see how somebody who's, putting it into an LLM is playing, I won't say fast and loose with copyright law, but they're certainly skirting around some of it.
Yeah, and it's not like we haven't hit this issue before with
No.
how data models are trained, where the data came from. So like in some cases, like we've talked about the BERT model before, it uses some open source data sets on unpublished books, but it also uses data from Wikipedia.
Well,
Other
but here's the thing.
LL, yeah, go ahead.
But here's the thing, though. Wikipedia has a very, very clear license.
Yeah,
And Wikipedia's license explicitly allows that sort of use.
yeah,
It gets fuzzier when you're looking at Reddit, for example.
yeah,
And it doesn't get fuzzier when you look at like the New York Times.
yeah,
But it's easy to get the New York Times in. And that's where you start asking the question, does an LLM that is being trained on data, is it learning or is it being trained on copyrighted data? And I guess you could take from that where my position is on this, but
yeah. Yeah, and that was kind of the difference that I was trying to show. In some cases, it's clear that with the data that you have, it's okay to do that. It's okay to train BERT on those models. But in other cases, whether it's crawling the internet and pulling stuff off, or I've seen in the news about people like that are writing scripts or authors having their works show up in data that models have been trained on, or people you're talking about models that include images or video. So now you've got people that are artists or photographers or videographers that are doing and having their stuff be the things that are the input for training stuff on.
it's actually it's no, definitely. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that one. This morning I was doing some testing with a video generation system, and I gave it a prompt, and I don't want to repeat the prompt, but the image that it produced used a landmark that I could clearly identify. And I'm looking at and I didn't ask for that landmark by name. I might have hinted at it, but I didn't ask for the landmark by name. Um, and I was kind of taken aback that it was so blatant.
Yeah,
But when I went and looked up this landmark in Wikipedia, lo and behold, there was almost the identical image. So it was pretty obvious to me where it got that image from to
right.
use in this generation. But these are serious ethical issues.
Yeah, so we've hit this issue before, and kind of the flip side we haven't talked about yet is the Hugging Face side. There are some specific guidelines on Hugging Face side as far as that you should have permission. You need to have the permission of people to use their data, and clearly, the people that were scraping the fire hose on Blue Sky were not getting permission of all hundreds and thousands or millions of people that they were getting data from. In the first case, the first posting of the million user data set was actually by a Hugging Face employee.
Oh,
And then there was a stink about it. And one of the policies as well from the BlueSky side of things is that there needs to be a way for users to exclude their data from being used with something without permission. And there was no clear way to do that. So the million post whatever data set got removed. Not really a big apology, even though it was violating some different policies. Even somebody that came on from the Hugging Face side that was talking about ethics, kind of skirted around the issue, gave a partial apology, but didn't really commit to the full thing. So, kind of a half-hearted attempt, I seem like, from both sides to not really address the issue. So that's concerning. And in some cases, it's not necessarily just the data, but a lot of effort. Typically, data scientists, when they're approaching this, approaching gathering data, they take the extra step of anonymizing the data.
yeah.
But this was something where you could clearly, and unfortunately, this has happened again. There's a 2 million data set, and I think maybe even an 8 million data set, and I just went and checked, and some of these data sets are still on Hugging Face. And I looked at the data, and you can see the post, and you can see the handle, and so you could actually go and look up that handle in BlueSky and read the person's profile, so it's definitely linking these comments to people, and that potentially could be going into training data sets. So now you can have an LLM that talks all about you or something without
Yeah.
you necessarily approving of that.
You know, saying you're tying it to a name kind of reminds me of this event that happened last week. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago at this point. Do you know who David Meyer is?
No, not offhand. I might.
Okay. Well, neither does ChatGPT, apparently.
Oh,
But if you ask it who David Meyer is, it will stop giving you output and say there's an error.
that's
And
interesting.
it was very interesting. And for a while, people were um, kind of trying to figure out what's going on here. Did this person request to get their name removed? Is this a European right to be forgotten thing? Is this, what did this person do that they've been censored? Or what is this? And I think, and I'm not sure I fully followed what happened. I think OpenAI has said, yeah, this looks like it's a bug. But it's some bug if so. I mean, that's a weird one. But it does talk about how strange it is just trying to do this data collection and how to do it ethically.
Yep.
And what do you do with this information once you have it?
Yeah, because you
Um,
definitely have the range of those that are trying to do the right thing, make sure that they're using open source, data, have permissions to use it. So, as ethical as possible side of things. There's people that are just, winging it, doing whatever they want. And then there's kind of this middle ground where at least there's some effort to remove the identity from the data.
yeah, and it's interesting. The whole notion of data collection and privacy is a tricky one. I know
Yeah.
that when I brought Voodoo Drive back online, I was very much, we need to be extremely privacy focused. And I put into, the privacy policy basically, we don't collect anything. It's all on you. Um, and I have a couple of test users, and as they were using it more and more, we were noticing problems. And we'll talk about some of this more in a future episode, I think. But one of the things that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, okay, maybe I should be taking some of their output and training it, building a tuned model. And then I stopped and I said, but wait a minute. I just said in my privacy
Yep.
policy that I'm not going to do that. Did I just overly restrict myself? Did I just mess myself up? What are the implications of this privacy policy that I very firmly believe in?
Yeah.
Um, and I think I found a way around it, and I think it's legitimate and safe. We'll talk about it some more in the future, but just this unrealization of, oh yeah, I have a privacy policy, and it's important to me. That gave me pause,
Yeah.
and
It's
and I
like,
think it
am
should
I
give
going?
people pause.
Yeah, exactly. Am I going to follow it or am I not? And it's easy if you're trying to. I guess it's maybe easier or more justifiable in your mind if you're trying to make a business out of this. Is like, I need to have this data, or what can I do, right? And I don't know if that's always the answer. I
I don't think it is. I mean,
Yeah.
because there's lots of things that I want to do if I'm running a business, but they are not ethical and sometimes not legal. Um, and yes, people still do them, but that certainly doesn't make it right just because I want it.
Just because you want the result,
Right. I mean,
right?
that's a 6 year old argument.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an interesting question, though. And that's a business question. And in some cases, also a personal question.
Yeah.
For example, I had an issue recently where I'm trying to put together a timeline of the past year for Gemini for a presentation that I'm doing. And this has actually proven more difficult than I expected. Mostly because there are release notes, but they're incomplete. And there are blog posts, but they're kind of scattered all over the place.
Hmm.
And, exactly which of these, and they're all copyrighted. So am I allowed to use them for my purpose? Is my purpose business or is it personal or semi professional or what? Um, and then I realized probably some of the best release notes that are out there are in a bunch of tweets that Logan Kilpatrick has done. So, okay, I'll go look at Logan's tweets. He's got a lot of tweets. Um, but I could go through those tweets one by one and write them down. Or I could somehow get all of the tweets and feed them into Notebook LM.
Hmm.
Is there a moral difference between the two? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Well, and your purpose was to present information and given, I don't know. It doesn't.
Right. It's a lot of it's a lot, and it's not straightforward and complicated. In this case, I think I am on a moral safe spot. I mean, I'm collecting information from a Google employee for a Google presentation that I'm making as a GDE, which is not as a Googler, but is kind of sort of on behalf of Google. So I feel like I'm on okay ground here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it's still an interesting ethical dilemma, and it was an interesting solution that I went with. I recorded a screen capture of me scrolling through the Twitter feed and fed that into Gemini and asked it to give me the information.
Oh.
So now mind you, it probably would have been just as easy for me to write this down, but this somehow felt better.
Yeah.
I don't know. These are all ethical questions though, but they're important for us as developers, as software engineers to think about.
Yep.
And one of the things uh, that I think about a lot, I went to when as we've talked about before, I went to school at an engineering school. I got a computer science degree, but I went to school in an engineering school. So there was a lot of talk frequently about what the ethical role of an engineer is. What and that's inherent in their job. What does a professional engineer's responsibility ethically boil down to? And they
Yeah.
use examples like um, the Challenger disaster. For those of you
Yep.
that may be too young to remember this, this was when the space shuttle Challenger exploded. There was an investigation committee afterwards that went to see who was at fault, and was it the fault of the engineers for doing something wrong? And the conclusion, I'm not sure exactly what the conclusion was, but I think one of it was that there were engineers who were kind of bullied into giving flight approval for circumstances where they did not feel it was appropriate, but they were bullied into giving an okay. And was that ethical? And I turn that around now and I say, as a software engineer, as a programmer, as a developer, what are our ethical responsibilities in our code? And I think that's important. It's important for us to understand and discuss and address.
Yeah, and I think from a developer perspective, there was some development involved with scraping the data from BlueSky and creating data sets. And if you were asked to do that on your job or something similar, then what is your place to speak up and inform or educate or even just point out that this is what the issues are with that approach and how you could do it differently or more ethically. Or sometimes you're given a data set or tasked to go find one, and once again, I think there's a certain burden on the developer since they're the ones that are using the data that they may understand licensing or better understand where data comes from and inform those making decisions what issues there could be with using the data, or one data set over a different data set.
Yeah, and I think these are all important considerations. And I'd love to hear how other people view these considerations. Where do you weigh things? How do you evaluate whether something is moral and ethical? And how do you handle it if you feel that it's not?
Yep.
So we do welcome your thoughts. Feel free to leave them in the comments below. On LinkedIn, you can find us on BlueSky. Probably,
Yep.
I'm sort of there. Sounds like you're there more than I am, Mark.
I'm more there, but you can find me, Mark Tucker, at bluesky.social.
And I am sure some of this stuff we'll be returning to another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Mark. Interesting topic today. I'm glad we went with it.
Yep, me too.